Okay, good evening, and thank you for viewing the August 10th, 2021 meeting of the Planning Commission. We are holding this meeting as a webinar in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. I want to start by thanking the community and visitors to Arcata and the county for their efforts to slow the spread of COVID-19. Remember, the three most important things you can do to protect yourself and others in the community are masking up, practicing social distance of 6 feet or more, and washing your hands regularly. These fundamental acts of social responsibility will help flatten the curve, keep ourselves and neighbors healthy, and keep our businesses open. Importantly, these measures show support for frontline and essential workers that serve us daily. If you wish to make public comment during the meeting, there are two ways to do so. First, if you join the webinar on a computer or similar device, click the raised hand icon when the commission is discussing the agenda item on which you would like to speak. When it is time for public comment on that item, the clerk will unmute you. You will have 2 minutes to comment. And second, if you did not log on to the webinar, you may join the meeting by phone. Call the number at the bottom of the screen, enter the meeting ID also at the bottom of the screen, press *9 on your phone when the commission is discussing the agenda item on which you would like to speak. Dialing *9 will let the clerk know that you would like to speak. When it is time for public comment on that item, the clerk will unmute you. You will hear a prompt that will indicate your phone is unmuted. You will have 2 minutes to comment. And with that, we will call this meeting to order. Can we begin with a roll call, please?
Yeah, Commissioner Davies.
Here.
Commissioner Barstow.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Besaid-Elcock.
Here.
Commissioner Figueroa.
Present.
Vice Chair Mayor.
Here.
And Chair Tagney.
Here, thank you. Next, we will move on to oral communications. Director Loya, do you have any communications for us?
There's no one in attendance to provide oral communications at this time.
Okay. And that moves us on then to the consent calendar. And the only item on the consent calendar is approving the minutes from our last meeting. If there are no changes or nobody wants to pull this item, do we have a motion to approve?
I noticed that on the webpage, when I brought up the agenda, I didn't see the minutes on the webpage. So I haven't seen the minutes.
So the action item is basically to accept the minutes into the record. And so even if you were absent on that item, you can vote on that if you'd like. Obviously, you can abstain if you feel better doing that. We did have some technical glitches. The agenda was up, and it said we were going to meet in person, and we had to revise that given the rapid climb in COVID numbers towards the end of last week. And so glitches getting the full agenda up. The agenda should be up now.
Okay, I just pulled it not too long ago and I didn't see the minutes on there. So can we still approve them even though they're not available to the public, or are they available to the public at this moment?
Let me confirm.
Yeah, why don't you? I'm not able to get on my computer because I'm on the computer.
Okay. Yeah, the agenda packet is up and the minutes are attached.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Director Loya, would you do the roll call, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner Davies?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Barstow?
Aye.
Commissioner Besaid-Elcock?
Aye.
Commissioner Figueroa?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayor?
Aye.
And Chair Tagney.
I wasn't here for that meeting. I'll just abstain on that. Okay, consent calendar is done for the evening. And we have no public hearing. So we're going to move on to business items, of which we have one. Sorry, we have two, don't we?
Yes.
Pardon me, I've mixed up my pages here. The first item, business item, wasn't it to elect chair and vice chair? And then we go on to our presentation. So with that, I would like to elect or nominate Julie Visade-Elcock to be our chair.
So for the commissioners, some of you have not done this process before, and for those of the others of you, it's been a year. And so it runs like a typical planning commission approval process where the nomination is basically a motion, and that motion would be seconded. You can either elect chair and vice chair in the same motion, or chair and vice chair separately. You could certainly have dialogue and discussion between a motion and or a vote.
That said, then I would like to go ahead and also nominate Judith Mayer to be vice chair, if we could save a little time and do one motion for both. If there's a second on that, we can move forward. If there isn't, throw out your ideas, please.
I'll second, Dan.
So there's a motion and
a motion and a second. I believe Commissioner Barstow has a question or statement.
Oh, well, you beat me to it on the second. I was going to second that also.
Okay, so we'll need a roll call vote on that.
Okay. Commissioner Davies?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Visade-Elcock?
Aye.
Commissioner Barstow?
Aye.
And Commissioner Figueroa?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayer?
Aye.
And Chair Tagney?
Aye.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Well, congratulations all.
Yes. And then the second business item here is to pursue our study session for the Strategic Infill Redevelopment Program.
All right. Thank you. And I guess it's up to you if you want to turn the chair over to now Chair Visade-Elcock immediately, or if you want to continue to chair the rest of the meeting. Just note that as a procedural step.
I just got a signal from Julie that she would rather wait.
Okay, she's going to have you finish. Okay, great.
All right.
Yeah.
Judith has her
and so tonight,
there's a hand raised. Judith?
Before we move on to the next business item, I'm just wondering if we can all thank Dan Tagney for being an absolutely terrific commission chair for all of these years. And welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Judith.
Despite the code,
Thank you,
COVID
Julie.
awkwardness. Thank you, everybody.
yeah, Dan, I think Rob, who, as you know, was chair before you, really set the bar, and so you've fallen short, because I think he was chair for like 12 years or something like that.
I know. He was a model. I keep thinking of him in the back of my mind.
But yes, thank you for all your service. It's
Yeah.
been great working with you as chair. I'm looking forward to shifting positions.
Yeah, I think it's great to rotate it around. So. All right. Business item number 2 is all you, David.
Okay, yeah, lucky for you all, it's not just all me. But Senior Planner Freitas is on. She's going to take the first part of this. She's going to update you a little bit on where we're at with some of the strategic infill redevelopment program outreach and engagement. And then I've got a fairly short presentation with a little bit of engagement plan for the end. And, we can take as much time or as little time as necessary or as you desire. And I'm going to share the screens that I hope Dilo will want me to share to help navigate you to our outreach that she's going to be discussing.
Okay, thank you. So mostly what I'm going to be talking about is the survey and the results that we've gotten so far. If you scroll down on this page to get involved, you can see the visioning survey and meeting in a box down here in the body of the text. And if you have not yet taken this survey, I would strongly encourage you to do so and send it to all of your friends. It takes about 20 minutes or less if you're familiar with some of the materials, which you all are. And it asks questions basically about your vision for Arcata, what you see as Arcata's values and what you think we should prioritize as we update the general plan, and what sort of tact we should take with considering how to accommodate growth and development in the city. And we have 167 responses so far, and we want to keep it open through the end of the year. We want to make sure that we have as many HSU students as possible take this survey. We haven't had many yet. But we are planning to do what we can to aggressively promote it when the students come back at the end of this month. And I know some of the professors have already offered to offer it to their classes as extra credit. And some of the results that we have gotten so far, I'm not going to share any specifics, but the major themes, I would say growth and change are definitely coming out. We have a few people who are concerned about changes to small town character, changing the things that they, really appreciate and love about Arcata. But most people are really interested in seeing infill. The word infill came up 4 or 5 times in free answer questions, which I see as being a great sign. It means that the wording is getting out there and people are hearing about what we're doing and they're excited. And synergies with HSU has come up a lot. I think the Polytechnic is definitely on people's minds, and I think that it is really going to pave the way for a lot of the work that we're doing, updating the zoning and talking about density and infill. Transportation and housing also came up a lot, as well as economic development and more diverse representation in government and decision making. And generally just a real interest from people in being welcoming, inclusive, and innovative. And hopefully with the close of the survey at the end of the year, we'll release all of the respondents' answers verbatim so you can explore them yourself and hear what your fellow community had to say. It's really been really interesting hearing everyone's responses to what they think Arcata's values are and what they see for the vision of this city. So definitely want to encourage you to get the word out on that and stay tuned for more. And we will be planning our next big community town hall with the release of the Gateway Plan draft, which will be happening in the next few months. So we kind of are going to be closing out one cycle of engagement and moving on to more engagement as we have the draft plan available for review. And then we start digging into some of the other elements of the general plan as well. So I think that's basically what I had. Let me know, David, if you had anything else you wanted to make sure that I covered.
Dilo, I have a quick question.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you encouraging county residents as much as you are City of Arcata residents to take this?
Yeah, so far we've had about 70% respondents who live within city limits, but we have a pretty wide variety of respondents, some people who wish they could live in Arcata but can't, some people who prefer the place they call home, but it's open to anyone and everyone who has an opinion about the way Arcata should grow and develop and who has an interest in seeing it done well. So it's not something that we have kept to only current city residents. And we have a lot of respondents from McKinleyville and Eureka and people who at one time went to HSU or lived here, but for whatever reason weren't able to stay.
Yeah, and I want to remind the commission, in that vein that, the planning work that we're doing, we're planning for people who aren't here. These are housing units that don't exist yet that we're planning for. These are jobs that don't exist that we're planning for. These are new parks that don't exist yet. And so, planning is oftentimes looking in the rearview mirror, asking the people who are already here, what is it that you want? And they're already here. They've already got it. And generally their answer is, I want what we have. I don't want it to change. And as you all know through the engagement that we've gone through to date, that there are a lot of people who are left out of this process as a result. And so our outreach effort really does try and reach out to people who don't currently live in Arcata but wish they could, or people who work in Arcata, don't live here, and have an opinion about the way that the community should develop. And so it's been a very broad strategy, and certainly when you're making your decisions, you certainly need to take that into consideration. But I think keeping it in the forefront of your mind that we're planning for people who aren't here. So if we ask the people who are here what it should be like, generally the answer is going to be just like it is.
Because it's a great place. One other thing I will add to that is that almost all of the survey questions are optional. There are only 2 that are required. And one is, do you live in Arcata? And then there are some other options. And the second is, have you been engaged in any of our previous engagement work? Have you been involved with the housing element? Did you go to any of our visioning sessions? And those are the only 2 required questions that we asked to kind of get a better sense of who is responding to our questions.
I would like to say that I could easily be promoting this through, my email or text list or something, and I will. I'm glad you asked, because this would be an easy one to ask friends and family and such to spend the 20 minutes and take it.
You could even tell them it's 15.
Okay.
You could just kind of run the numbers down. And we also have it available in Spanish for anyone who wants to get it out to communities who would prefer to take it in Spanish.
All right, thank you for that. And again, the survey is open through the end of the year, and it's on our website. So you can Google SIRP and Arcata and you'll find it. All right, I wanted to, Dilo had mentioned the Arcata Gateway Plan that we're currently working at breakneck speed on with Plan West Partners, our consultant and ally in bringing this plan to the community. And so I wanted to update you on where we're at. It's at the very beginnings of this work, but there's some work product that we want to share, and just a little bit of framing that we want to make sure that everyone's on board with and understands. And again, I'm not starting at the beginning. I'm starting kind of in the middle. So feel free, if you don't remember something, or if something seems foreign to you, please stop me and ask me. All of these concepts have years, literally years of public engagement that back the conclusions of the direction that we're heading. We've consistently gotten affirmation from you all, the Planning Commission, as well as City Council and many of the committees for this work. And so I hope that this doesn't come as a shock to you, but I do want to make sure that everybody has the option and opportunity to say, okay, hold on a second, how did you get there? Because some of this I'm kind of jumping right in the middle of. I just want to be upfront about that. All right, I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation, and my first question for you is to make sure that you're seeing the full screen and not the screen with the notes. I believe you are, but someone confirm that for me.
It looks like a half screen to me. I don't know if others are seeing that, but it's cut off. Oh, there we go.
Okay, it's working now.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so update on the strategic infill redevelopment program, or specifically what we're doing right now with one of the planning documents that falls under that program, the Arcata Gateway Plan. Now, it's kind of funny, as I was looking back through earlier presentations, I found one from 2009 where, I started off the presentation, hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And I mentioned, HSU and the impact that HSU has on housing and so on and so forth. And I think, as Dilo had alluded to, now we're looking at a situation where HSU isn't the elephant in the room, it's actually the elephant is the room. And so we have multiple factors going on right now that are really exacerbating an already extreme problem with housing in the city of Arcata. And there doesn't appear to be an end in sight. This isn't just a blip. It's not a temporary boom bust cycle. We're on a trajectory right now, and I've talked with several folks that are in the real estate business, talked to several people who are looking for homes, who recently purchased homes, folks at HSU, so on and so forth. But we've got not only HSU is generating a polytechnic, which will about double what their highest student body was at any time in the recent past. But we've also got, climate refugees that are coming to our area in droves. We have people who, with the freedom of remote working, are coming to our area in droves. People who are cashing out of, higher rent districts like LA and San Francisco, where they're being able to come to our community and offer cash on a house at prices that are higher than the asking. And so there's, significant pressure on our community right now, and that pressure will only be exacerbated over time as time goes on. We did do the housing element and our housing needs assessment and our vacant lands inventory. We identified a very minimum of 211 units that were unmet. And so this plan that we're working on is in partial response to that. We had committed in the housing element, and the Housing Community Development Department in the state certified our housing element on the basis of doing this rezoning work that we're currently engaged in. And so a lot of the public engagement started with the housing element. We carried through what we were hearing in the housing element, a lot of lessons learned from some recent large scale projects. I start twitching when I say one of the names of them, so I won't mention it. But the community learned a lot from that work, and and so did our department. And so one of the proposals that came out was to target certain areas. We see Valley West, the Craftsman's Mall area, and the neighborhood surrounding it, the downtown, and the current gateway, what we were then calling the K Street corridor, as opportunities for increasing housing development and streamlining. So again, we're talking specifically about the area surrounding K Street corridor, the Creamery District at the center, up through Alliance and out to Samoa Boulevard. These boundaries aren't fixed. We're still working through the detail, but this is the general area that we're talking about. This area, as you can see on the right-hand side of the frame, is all purple and pink. Purple and pink in our current zoning means that it's industrial limited or industrial general zoned properties. So what this means is that, those areas were identified as industrial, and we all know that they've converted just naturally. The market has converted them over time. And we've seen a lot of really creative, reuse of sites out there. So we're trying to sort of take back this area and repurpose it, reimagine it, create some value in the land that isn't currently there because of existing zoning, and really strive for and encourage the higher density development that we're looking for in the future. So that was the origin of it. The Arcata Gateway Plan is kind of a two-piece plan. The first part of it is a general plan element. Now, the general plan, you're all aware, lays out the policy, the land uses, and the implementation measures to achieve those policy objectives. So the Arcata Gateway Plan is going to focus in on this area that we've outlined as having high potential for development, and it's going to develop a body of policy that's real specific to that area. The reason for doing this is because the general plan that applies citywide that affects, Forest Hillsides, the same as it affects, the bottomlands, the same as it affects, the bay and the lands that are out in the agricultural portions of our bottomlands. Those policies are all diverse and very general. We want to be able to target development for this area, and so we're really honing in on what are the specific policies and objectives for this area. There's some real opportunities in this area. It's walking distance of the plaza, for example. It's walking distance of the boundary of HSU. There are lots of job opportunities that we're within walking distance of it, and it also has world-class trail system running through the center of it. So there's a lot of work to do on the general policy direction, and that'll fall into an element of the general plan. The second part of the Gateway Plan drops down in detail from what we'll find in the general plan element and is going to be more of a form-based code. I don't want to promise that it's 100% going to be form-based code. There are some pros and cons with adopting form-based codes, and we're still working through the details of how we get at the objectives of this planning effort, the most efficient process possible. But ultimately, the objective is to result in principally permitted high-density development. And so on the one extreme, what we have currently in this conventional zoning situation, where you use various site standards like density, use, floor area ratio, setbacks, and et cetera to regulate the development. And then once you put in those outside parameters on them, you let the developers come in on a one-off basis and propose something. Generally speaking, depending on the use, you take them through a planning process, and the public gets to whittle away at one-off projects with their community desires, and it's not an integrated, well thought out, community-wide plan. On the opposite end of the spectrum, form-based codes provide very specific detail on building types, the form of those buildings, how they will interact with the public right-of-ways, for example, and with each other. And these are very detailed codes that oftentimes result in a more integrated, thoughtful approach. Sometimes these are so prescriptive that they may have the effect of stifling the type of development that you want. So if I were to hazard a guess at this point, I think where we're gonna land for what's right for Arcata is somewhere in the middle, somewhere on the form-based code side of zoning and design guidelines, with fewer restrictions on use types and more emphasis on what the built environment is going to look like. I'm gonna pause there for a minute because this has been quite a bit, and see if there are any questions. Okay. Vice Chair Mayer.
Yeah, I'm wondering as this process proceeds, there are a number of sites in that area that either don't or are adjacent to areas that don't actually have full city infrastructure. At this point, some of those industrial areas, for example, don't have a lot in the way of sewer service, for example. And I'm wondering, as these plans call for particular mixes of uses, how we're going to be looking at effects on our need for infrastructure, costs, and the risk that we're actually going to overload what we have based on the schedules for upgrading things that might not jive with the developer's desires to build. Is that going to be a part of this process? And are there going to be requirements for infrastructure in place before developments will be considered?
Yeah, that's a really good series of questions. The short answer is yes. There's absolutely a infrastructure component to the planning work we're doing right now. And recall that this Arcata Gateway plan is also nested within the larger infill plan, which has updates to the general plan, the larger body of work, the general plan. And all of that is going to be assessed for its environmental impact, for its infrastructure impacts, parking, circulation, traffic, the whole thing, and that'll be analyzed in one document so that all the cumulative effects can be evaluated at the same time. The infrastructure planning for sort of maximum build out in these areas will be included, and there will be certainly a requirement that the infrastructure is scaled appropriately to the development. There's no way we can build before, for example, there's enough water infrastructure to provide water for those new developments, or sewer infrastructure for those new developments. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, and so you mentioned that the environmental impact reviews would be done on one document. So what you're saying is that the Arcata Gateway, the infill plan, and presumably, since we don't have it yet, the local coastal program are all going to be reviewed pretty much simultaneously in terms of cumulative impact? We still don't have the local coastal program, and so if these are all happening at once, we're looking at cumulative impacts of all of them, correct?
Yeah, and fortunately, because of the area that we're planning in, really does overlap. The cumulative effects, if you will, they're actually just the same effects. And so, for example, half this area roughly is in the coastal zone. If you look at the blue dotted line that zigzags through the center, that separates the inland portion on the north side of the blue line from the coastal portion on the south side of the blue line. And so the environmental work considers the zoning changes that happen in here. These zoning changes will ultimately get submitted to the Coastal Commission for local coastal program update and amendment. So there's no new impact associated with it. It's the impact that we've already studied. I can't guarantee that the coastal planning and this planning will align 100% with the timelines. But I can tell you that obviously we understand that both these planning efforts are happening simultaneously. So we'll consider the changes that are happening in each of the documents. Any other thoughts before we move on? Okay.
I have a written question, David, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Is there electric vehicle infrastructure that's starting to become a norm in, a big build out in a new area like this?
Yeah, part of a huge emphasis actually of both the public outreach that we've received and our internal planning is on alternative transportation. And so in addition to electric charging is a part of that. In addition to that, the building code is changing, and there's a 3-year updates, and then there are the updates to the electric code periodically. And my understanding is that electric charging is going to be required in certain size developments, and I think each of these will qualify. And so one of the benefits of doing this sort of broader planning effort is that you can take that comprehensively and say these are where we need charging stations relative to these other activities or these other uses that are going on in the town or these other planned uses that will happen eventually. And certainly electric charging is an important element of carbon neutrality and our adaptation policy, but so is other means of alternative transportation. And so we're taking all of those into consideration when we make this plan.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So feel free just to pipe in. I'm going to actually move you all to my other screen over here, so I won't see you probably if you raise your hand. Okay, so I just wanted to jump into a little bit about the structure and organization of the plan at this point. This is a little bit fluid, but we're honing in enough to where I feel like I can share it and start to get some feedback from you as decision makers. So this is the outline as we currently have it. Most fleshed out is sort of the introduction and the vision. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going into the vision here because that's what we have most well developed. And it's really, again, based on pretty extensive engagement. But it's really down here is when you get into some of the form-based code stuff and the implementation. And then we have a whole background of information that we'll bring forward to contextualize this and provide the policy framework. As Dilo had mentioned, we've been working through the visioning. We've done a lot of work to engage the community. The current survey that Dilo had mentioned is reaffirming a lot of what we've been hearing from the community previously. And so we're starting kind of at the highest level and saying, hey, what are our guiding principles? And again, this is based on community input and input from the leaders, as well as movements that the state is making us do. Dilo had brought up and elevated this idea that some people are reluctant to see the community change. They like the small town character, they like the rural character, they like things the way that they are. And change is scary. Change is difficult to absorb. And a lot of the change that we are planning for right now is change that we realize is going to happen whether we like it or not, and that the state is going to force us into it if we don't take control and plan for it ourselves. And so, one of the key take-home messages, and I want everybody on the Planning Commission and everyone in the community to be absolutely crystal clear on this, is that status quo is not an option. We've identified several negative detractors to our community, or negative impacts to our community, rather, as a result of status quo, especially moving forward. If as the markets continue to pressurize our housing markets and our economic markets, and so Arcata is going to change. I want everybody to be crystal clear on that. And now is our chance to work as a community to form that change, to shape that change, and to have a say into what that change looks like. The other thing that I want people to be really absolutely 100% crystal clear on is that that change is going to reflect as very large scale buildings. We've got the old Isaacson's lot, which was a vacant lot after having been a car lot for decades. And right now, a 4-story building is going up in that parking lot. And that is, there's more to come. We're going to see more of that. And the community needs to, think about how do we embrace that change and how do we help shape that change. So infill and high density housing is a key guiding principle. And this is not only because the housing element says, hey, we need to have a certain number of units. I think that that falls on deaf ears for a lot of people. The state's telling you have to have 611 units, and so we're planning for them. The reality is that if you go and talk to any of our major employers in the area, they'll tell you stories of woe of losing employees because they're losing their housing right now. These are people with good, well-paying jobs, long-term, well-paying jobs that are losing their house. They're going homeless because the housing market is so hot right now that the house they're renting, the owner is saying, it's time for me to sell. That's not only impacting that one family, people who have roots in this community. That's impacting the businesses who are now losing employees. The employees are saying, hey, I have to move back home. I can't find a place to live. And so, the infill, high density housing and mixed uses go hand in hand, but it's not only to support new uses. It's to support existing uses. Right at the center of this entire planning effort is racial equity and social justice. There are state laws that require communities that have or jurisdictions that have disadvantaged communities to work through social justice solutions, and there's a whole body of law around that. We're not required to because we're not technically designated a disadvantaged community. But I'm proud to be working with a community that has taken this on as as a voluntary effort to ensure that the policies that we create help to break down systemic racism and the impacts of systemic racism. Alternative transportation, as I mentioned earlier, is a core guiding principle. In addition, we're talking about being climate ready, not only in the new developments, not only in the way that they're built out, but also recognizing that due to the impacts of sea level rise and other climate changes, densification is going to be required. People are going to ultimately not be able to live in areas that are subject to sea level rise. We need to start planning for that now. This plan is in partial response to that. And then in addition, the community investment, we heard a lot in some of the recent large-scale developments that came through the Planning Commission about people really desiring to be at the ground floor of that, that planning effort, especially the design effort, and wanting to have a say in how these areas are developed. And they wanted to talk regionally. They didn't want to talk about single site specifics. And so, this is my call out to all those folks that got involved in the Village Project and others to, get involved. This requires community investment and community buy-in, and now is your opportunity. And then lastly, there's real focus on the arts. In our vision statement, which I'll share with you in just a second, we recognize the Creamery District, which has a thriving art community and is sort of the focal point of, at least a large share of the art community in the city of Arcata, right at its center. And so we want to, recognize that and leverage that. We've talked a lot about affordable housing in the past, and we all appreciate our artist community. And one of the concepts here is to do a mashup of those two things and make sure that artists have access to affordable housing right in the district that that speaks to them. So from all those guiding principles, we developed this vision statement, and I'm just going to read it to you because it's excellent. The Arcata Gateway area is a vibrant, mixed-use, community-oriented blend of transitional neighborhoods with the Creamery District at its physical core and entrepreneurial heart in its community center. The Gateway Plan lifts these values to grow opportunity and build community equitably. It is mixed use, mixed tenure, high density, mixed income, thoughtfully designed, pedestrian-friendly, community-facing, sustainable, equitable redevelopment. So that is the working principle, and I just want to pause for a moment there. It integrates the concepts that we've heard, over the last 3 or 4 years that we've been doing this work, and really focuses in on this core concept that the entire plan hinges on growing opportunity and building community equitably. Again, I just wanted to pause and see if there are any comments or thoughts.
Sounds like
Feel free.
Arcata. It sounds like exactly what we all want. I agree. It's very well written. Good guiding words.
Okay. I'm going to jump next into kind of the participatory portion of this presentation. The next layer, so once we go from guiding principles and we've talked about the vision, the next layer to sort of outline this area, we're framing it as challenges and opportunities. And I hope in the very near future to be able to bring some content to you around that. We've got some draft content, but it's not quite ready for prime time. But I just wanted to throw these out there as sort of some ideas. Some of these we've already incorporated into our draft guiding concepts. But I wanted to have a little bit of dialogue. And again, I want to really encourage you to train your thinking to this area specifically. What can this area do? What are the challenges in this area, or what are the challenges that this area can help us to solve? And so far, high on the list, obviously housing need. The area has a lot of what could be considered blight, some antiquated land uses and underutilized properties. There's historic contamination. There are lots of historic resources in the district, and we need to think thoughtfully about how we approach those. I mentioned climate change, racial equity, and social justice, and then employment as well. So I just want to open it up into a dialogue around, are these the right targets in terms of the challenges and opportunities within this site? Are there others that we haven't really listed here? What are your thoughts?
Regarding the housing need component of this discussion, doesn't the total number of units outlined here still fall woefully short of what we anticipate needing, especially with the Polytechnic? And I suppose part two is, so is there another effort to address a bigger number?
Yeah, the number that we're using right now for planning purposes is what some of my colleagues would say laughably high. I had my consultant try and talk me down, even using silly things like math to try and prove his point. Right now, we're using for primarily planning purposes 3,500 units as the as the upper limit of total number of housing units that could be created in this district. Just to put that into context, we have historically we've had about 1,000 units produced a decade in the past, and that's like pretty much throughout Arcata's history. That's an average. So there was a bump, post-war bump, but for the most part, it's been about 1,000 units. I would argue that looking backwards doesn't necessarily inform the future housing development, in particular because we've had policies that would limit the ability to develop those housing units. So if you create policies that facilitate and expand housing unit development, you may get more housing units. 3,500 units, though, is pretty large number. Right now, the average per person household would likely change, because if we actually achieve 3,500 units, probably the majority of those will be efficiency units, smaller units, and so you might have fewer people in them. But just to give you an idea, we have about 2.3 people per household, roughly, and so 7,000 more people added to the population. We're at close to 18 now. That gives you a sense, for what a rapid expanse in growth that would be. But I try and remind people that this is a 20-year plan, number one. Number two, the planning will not include maximum density. It'll include minimum densities. And so people may get creative with what they do with the density. And so total unit count may be different. So that's one element of it. But to address real specifically your points about the Polytechnic, HSU is not planning on having all of its housing provided for in Arcata. They do think there's that, and they're actually going to take leadership on producing housing through this new Polytechnic phase. And they'll be actually building out housing in Arcata, McKinleyville, and Eureka to support that new student body. There's still going to be a huge burden on the private sector, though, to provide those housing units. And I think that's why I'm sort of raising the alarm bells and saying that HSU is the elephant in the room at this point. There's going to be a huge demand for housing in the near future.
And regarding, sorry, quickly, when do you expect that the Polytechnic is actually going to be live and this doubling of the total student body is actually going to occur?
I've seen their growth projections for the Polytechnic, and they're pretty slow and steady pace to begin with. But they want to try and get back up to around the 7,500 mark within the first 3 years. 7,500 mark is about what the max student body was in recent past. And so, while we have the added, the pile-on factor of, COVID, work from home, and other climate refugees and so on and so forth, that those are exacerbating the problem. That the housing market has seen that kind of pressure before, 7,500 people. So, I do think that there's, it is going to create market pressure that we'll need to respond to, that the private sector will need to respond to. So to sum it up, the 3,500 units just in this area is the first piece of it, and then we're also going to be planning for, for additional units outside of this area, recognizing once we've sort of mastered the process for doing higher density zoning in this area, we can other areas, the Craftsman's Mall area, the Valley West area, Safeway, Uniontown Shopping Center, and a couple of other opportunity areas we've identified.
And David, I think we had some more hands that you just can't see, so we'll have to defer to the chair to.
Yeah, Judith has got a hand raised.
Yeah, I really like that you're looking at this in terms of challenges and opportunities. I hope that you're actually extending that analysis very specifically with the infill and with the gateway area on a site-by-site basis, because that is the way to have a meaningful participatory process and some transparency in how the process is unfolding. And as far as the housing pressures associated with the Polytechnico, I'm kind of saying this, I'm watching that process from HSU, both kind of as a little bit of an insider and as an outsider. We've seen HSU plans for rapid expansion in the past. Many of you will recall that some of our relatively recent plans figured that we'd have 12,000 students on campus around now, just a few years ago. And one of the things about the Polytechnic plans are that they're also going to be embracing possibilities for distance learning. And so not all of these students that the optimistic plans are looking at enrolling are necessarily going to be increasing our housing demands in Arcata. And I think it's really important that the city work closely with HSU so that their expansion does not create a situation where they're in effect pushing housing in Arcata beyond where we're ready to go on the schedule. And I know they're planning to develop some of this housing themselves. I know that the foundation has actually, bought the Craftsman's Mall site. But if we assume that all of this housing expansion is going to be in effect for students or efficiencies, we risk developing housing that may lack flexibility in the future. And I think that one of the big challenges across all of this is to maintain our very long-term flexibility. The city can adapt to a variety of needs as they change if we do that, and not to lock ourselves into a model that is dependent on a particular policy that this administration is pushing for one institution. I guess gibberish means it's really important that the city and university have a two-way influence and dialogue and not a one-way directive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to let the commission and the community know that HSU reached out early and often, and we're in regular communication, both with, with a couple of different divisions at HSU to ensure that, we're in lockstep. And one of the first questions, that I was asked by HSU is, hey, we need to get together on infrastructure because we realize there's going to be an impact if we start doing these developments. And so I don't want to leave the commission with the impression that this planning effort is designed around students. You may recall from earlier presentations, and I didn't emphasize it here, but we really are, seeking a mixed tenure type development. So we'd like to be able to see ownership opportunities as well as rental opportunities. We'd like to see mixed income projects. So we'd like to be able to see projects where, you don't know the person walking out the front door that they are low income just because of the building they're living in. And, there are various opportunities for affordability by design. We see that in micro units. And the developer is able to increase the total unit count and better facilitate operations in that manner. But I don't think that is a endless market. And I think that the concept here is that the market is much richer than just students, and the market will provide for that as a result. So I think those are really good points, Vice Chair Mayor.
I'd like to ask briefly, do we have an assurance yet that this Polytechnic is going through? I thought there was still some more Board of Regents final decisions. Where are we at in that?
Yeah, I would invite HSU to come speak to the commission about the Polytechnic, and I'll certainly do that. I don't want to speak for HSU. It's my understanding there are still some steps moving forward, but I think that the impression that I'm getting is that most of those steps are somewhat procedural. But I'll certainly invite a representative from HSU to come speak with the commission about the Polytechnic. Oh, let's see. We may have a. Let's see. I'm going to get out of the presentation real quick here so we can take public comment. Do you mind if I just bring someone in who may be able to address that question immediately?
Yes, please.
Okay. Call-in user 2, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's Connie Stewart, Executive Director of Initiatives for Humboldt State University. I am listening in, and I'm happy to answer any of your HSU-related questions.
Anybody have any commission questions for Connie Stewart? Connie, perhaps you could just tell us when there'll be a final, yes, this is a for sure phase that's going to happen.
We are still in the self-study phase. We have just turned in another draft. Our final draft of the self-study is due in September. We hope to be in front of the Board of Trustees to ask to become a polytech in early next year. And if so, we would get the designation in 2023. Regardless of whether we get the designation or not, we are going forward with building programs that will get us closer to being a polytech. So the technology and engineering programs that we are considering are moving forward regardless of the status. We want folks to understand the status is what we're going for, but we're still actively seeking new programs. As you all know, the governor has given us funding, which includes funding for housing developments on our existing sites. We are actively talking with the city of Arcata and the city of Eureka and the county about other locations. Our name is actually Humboldt State University, not Arcata State University. And so we are looking for partnerships outside the city to take care of our housing. But, you know, in addition to students, we, as David talked about earlier, have a significant workforce housing shortage in our area. And so we hope the city of Arcata is considering the workforce housing needs not only of HSU, but healthcare is desperate right now for additional housing. And I'm hearing from just about every industry. So why don't I stop there and ask if anybody has any other questions?
I'm not seeing any here, Connie.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back into listening mode, but I'm happy if anybody has anything to chime in. Thanks.
Thank you for your input.
Thanks, Connie. I wish I'd have seen her text just before I said I will invite a member from HSU to speak on this, because then I would have looked really smart. You know, as a matter of fact, I had HSU waiting in the wings. Thank you so much, Connie, for jumping to my rescue there. So, at the risk of, let's see, I'm going to pop this out actually in case there are other folks that want to raise their hand, and then I'll go back to that list in case you want to take a look at that. And if it, generates any thoughts, or, we could spend as much or as little time as you want on this. If you feel like, hey, yeah, we're moving forward, these are the right target areas for challenges and opportunities. We take that, or we'll take as granular information as you feel fit to provide. I believe Commissioner White has a question or comment.
I was just wondering if you had handy the presentation that you did for the traffic and public safety. I think it was on the maybe.
I don't have it at my disposal right now, and frankly, it's not ready for commission consumption. Okay. There are a couple of different processes that we're working through, and I'll explain those when we're ready to bring that forward. Okay. Thank you. In addition, we have some circulation and traffic planning work that we've been doing with engineering and our consultant, who has a whole team of traffic engineers. And I'm anxious to bring that to you all. I know you all want to see it as well, but we've been doing a lot of work on both vehicular circulation and non-vehicular circulation that I'll be excited to share with you in the very near future.
There was also another portion that I believe there were like public amenities that developers could choose. I think there were like 6. Is that something that you can pop up on the screen easily?
It's really not ready for public consumption right now. Yeah. Got it. No, not at all. And let me just explain briefly what it is that you're referring to, the rest of the commission and the community. you may recall from earlier presentations that part of the concept here is that instead of going through a public review process where on every single project you go to 8 or 9, 10, 11 committees and have each committee say, well, we'd love it if you provide this, and we'd love it if you provide that, and then pretty soon the project is overburdened with conditions that makes it infeasible. If instead we said in advance, again, specific to this area, these are the amenities in this area, or these are the regional amenities associated with this area that we're going to want developers to provide. And so the concept is that we'll have that list of amenities as sort of checklist items that they'll need to submit for their building plans. And so, for example, community desire for affordable housing in mixed income projects has floated forward several times. That will be one of the amenities ultimately that gets into this plan. And so if you're willing to provide affordable housing in a certain mix in your buildings, then you satisfy the requirement for this principally permitted pathway, for example. And so we're still sorting through what that rubric would look like. Some amenities maybe rise to the level where we would actually want to incentivize those. We'd provide you an added incentive if you provide this amenity. One of the things that's been floated before is public parking garage. It's heretofore been impossible for anyone to make a public parking garage pencil. But perhaps if you are allowed to build that public parking garage, that becomes a revenue source for you. You can actually charge for those parking spaces. And then in addition to that, you get levels. Those don't add to the height limitation. So you get those levels free, if you will. That's an incentive that we would say, look, if you're going to provide a parking structure and we need 3 throughout the region in the next 20 years, let's say we determine, or this many parking spaces, that would be the kind of amenity that we might incentivize. And then other amenities would be just expected or required. And so right now we've gone through a process over the last month with our committees to say, hey, what is it that you want to see implemented in this area? Again, trying to concentrate the policy in this area and concentrate the implementation of those policies and certain features that we would then add to the plan. And so over the course of the last month, we've gone through and had the committees give us some input. Staff is then going to digest that and create a recommendation for the Planning Commission to take a look at in relative near future. Unfortunately, that workload, that body of work is not advanced enough to be able to share with the public at this point.
Thank you, David. Any other commission responses or questions on this list? I'd like to say that personally, as I've thought about this project based on that part of town, I think it's brilliant. That part of town does feel like it has tremendous opportunity for development, and I love that. I mean, it almost feels like it's further away than it is, but like your map showed so well, it's all so close to downtown, and I think it's just a great idea, great concept overall.
Awesome. Commissioner White?
I just wanted to echo the sentiment of the live work opportunity for artists in the Gateway. I think that's going to be really exciting if our artists could actually afford to not only live in Arcata, but live in the community where they're creating art. So I'm really excited to see what that might look like.
Yeah, me too. We've conceptually talked about it for a number of years, and there's a couple of models out there. So I'm excited to be able to incorporate some artist housing, some way to make artist housing that's affordable as well. Well, that's all I have prepared for tonight, and I'm just going to double check with Connie and see. I'm not sure she has her hand up again, or if this is from last time. Connie, did you want to talk again?
No, sorry, I just lower my hand. My apologies.
Okay, no problem. So yeah, if anybody has additional comments or thoughts or ideas you want us to carry forward, otherwise we'll bring it back when we have a little more work to share with you. And you know, again, I'm super excited and looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Director Loya. Exciting stuff, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it again before too long. And it sounded like the commission was very interested to hear from HSU at some point about their growth plans. So that closes our business items for the evening, and we move on to correspondence and communications. Is there anything from City on this?
Not at this time. I guess the only thing I'll mention, I'm sure you all know already, but the City Council did appoint Meredith Matthews as our new council member. She replaces Sophia Pereira. And so we're up to full council again with that appointment from last week. She should be sworn in at the next council meeting next Wednesday. So welcome her to the team.
Thank you. Are there any commission correspondence or communications? I have one quick question I'll throw out, David. Or this is to Dilo, perhaps. In terms of looking up the housing survey that you spoke of earlier, you, David, I think said you can Google SIRP, S-I-R-P, and I tried that and it did not come up with the City of Arcata housing survey. So
yeah, if you combine, yeah, I'll answer for Dilo because I believe she's eating cake. We're all going to wish her father a collective happy birthday because she's actually enjoying some birthday time with her dad. So can you see my browser? If you do, whoops,
yes.
SIRP, I'm sorry, S-I-R-P and Arcata together.
Okay. SIRP Arcata.
It should be one of the top hits that you get.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So
yeah,
SIRP
it should be one
Arcata.
of the top hits.
That was the mistake I made. I didn't include Arcata in that. All right. If there are no more correspondence and communications, we're done. Anybody? Okay. Thank you all, and good night.
Thanks again for all your service, Dan.